Hello everybody, welcome to Totally Tabled. My name is Shaggy, and today I'm just giving you my quick first impressions of Expeditions. Now I just did a full solo playthrough of Expeditions on the channel, please go check that out. For this video, I'm going to assume that you've already seen that playthrough or you know how Expedition plays. Furthermore, I want to emphasize that this is not a review, this is my first impressions having played the solo mode 4 times. I haven't played at any other player count, so please keep that in mind when you listen to my thoughts. I really want you to take my opinions with a grain of salt. Go watch the playthrough if you want to find out if the game is right for you. Now, I really wanted to discuss Expeditions because something very strange happened. I had 2 viewers in the comments say that they thought the game looked boring. And they use those exact words, boring. And that's very unusual for my channel. I'm not sure I've ever had anyone say that about a game. And so I found that response quite interesting. And I think what's going on here is there's a lot of people going into this game with misplaced expectations. And I say that because it happened to me. Expeditions is being marketed as a sequel to Scythe. I mean, it's right there on the box or in the manual or somewhere. Somewhere it's making it very clear that this is supposed to be a sequel to Scythe. And by the way, could we come up with a more generic name? Expeditions? Like, that bugs me to no end. I mean, this is a game about meteorites falling from the sky and corrupting the land. We can't come up with a better name than Expeditions, especially on the heels of Scythe. What a cool title for a game. No, we're gonna... it drives me crazy. But look, I can understand wanting to have a sequel to Scythe. Who wouldn't? I absolutely adore this artwork. I think the world is so cool. Of course we want more games set in this world with this gorgeous art. The problem is it sets up an expectation that the game is going to be of a similar weight or have a similar sense of scale and have the same scope as Scythe. Especially when you have it in such a big box, you have these massive tiles, these hexes, forming this huge map on the table that you're exploring. You have minis, you have the wooden corruption tokens. The production itself screams this is going to be an epic experience. And clearly, again, you've watched the playthrough, you know this. This is a much more streamlined, simple, small game. This is a design that's clearly aimed at a more mainstream audience. There are very stripped down and streamlined mechanisms here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Not to me anyway. But if you're going in with the expectations that you're going to have an experience similar to Scythe, I can understand why people might be let down. I can understand why people might say, that looks boring to me. Now, just to be clear, I don't find it boring at all. I think it's a really interesting game, especially as a solo game. But I do wish that the game had been produced differently. I feel like it's been overproduced. The sort of the size of the game design does not match the size of the production here. Why can't this be in a smaller box with smaller tiles? Why does this even need to be in the Scythe universe? I mean, we might forget, but Scythe itself suffered a little bit from this. When it was first coming out, everyone was thinking, wow, massive 4X dudes on the map. No, it turned out to be a sort of hybrid-y, Euro-y experience. And that's what makes it great. But again, there were those sort of misplaced expectations due to the marketing, due to the hype. And I feel like we're suffering from a little bit of that with Expeditions. I mean, heck, the same thing happened with Tapestry, right? I think properly orienting your audience to what kind of game they can expect to play is very important. And the cover does that work, your marketing does that work, the theme, the art, everything does that work. And calling this the sequel to Scythe is not helpful. Okay, enough of that. What I really want to talk about is what I think is ultimately a fun solo game. A solo game that I enjoy and, that I would more enthusiastically recommend to someone looking for something a little more streamlined, if not for the sort of the price and the overproduction in the big box. Those things make it a little harder to sort of full-throatedly recommend. But if you're looking for a slightly streamlined solo experience, I think this is really fun. It's a game that features really quick, simple turns. right? You're usually doing 2 out of the 3 possible actions, which is just move, play a card and resolve it, and activate a tile. And that's it. Occasionally you get to do all 3, but most of the time you're doing a different combination of those, or 2 of those 3 things. So your turns are really fast and kind of simple. And so what they did is make an extremely streamlined, quick and simple AI system where you're simply just flipping a card and taking very quick actions. A lot of times you're resolving that AI in like 5 to 10 seconds because they're just simply moving on the board and doing nothing else. And a lot of people might see that as kind of strange, like, why aren't they doing more things? They're just sort of moving around, blocking spaces, occasionally cycling the cards that are on the table. But it's nice. You get through their turn real quick, get right back to your turn, and it keeps that flow going, which is what you want when you have a more simple game. And really the heart of the fun here, which is true of a lot of different games, is the card play, where you have these multi-use cards. You have sort of different types of cards, and you can use them in different ways. You need a certain type of worker to activate a special ability at the bottom of the card, so you can use that play action to play the card. If you have that worker, you could put it on there, do a special ability. But then you can also take special actions in order to tuck those cards to get different resources, to get ongoing abilities, to get points, at the end of the game, all sorts of different things. And so finding some synergies and some combos for how you use those cards, deciding when to just play them for the abilities or when to sort of start tucking them away. All that's really fun. And because it's kind of a race, because you're sort of trying to race to get those achievements, just sort of like in Scythe, it means you're always trying to work at being as efficient as you possibly can. And that keeps up the tension and, to me, makes for an interesting experience. Especially solo, because the solo opponent is really getting out of the way and not interrupting the fun. Now, I think a lot of the other criticisms of the game are particularly at the higher player counts. And again, having just played it solo, I can kind of see how, I think this game really will shine at lower player counts. I'm not sure I'd want to play this with more than 3. And honestly, this might just be one that I keep for a solo play when I want something, a little lighter. And playing it solo does kind of solve one of the really glaring issues, at least for me, just how unbalanced the different mech powers are. I mean, maybe there's some deep math going on that I can't understand, but it certainly feels like some of these mechs' powers are way more useful and fun and desirable than others. In the playthrough, the mech that I used seems like one of the most powerful ones. It's the one that, if you put a gun to my head and said, you have to win this game, that's the mech that I would choose. Because being able to just gain cards straight into your hand rather than having to, have them come in tapped essentially and then having to refresh everything, skipping that step is huge. And that's valuable like many times in the game. 8, 9, 10 times. One of the other mechs just lets you move 4 spaces rather than 3. Now, I mean, that could be handy, maybe a couple of times in the game, but there's just no comparison. I mean, what power would you rather have? It's not even close. At least when you're playing solo, you can, pick the mech you want. And if you want a little bit more of a challenge, maybe you pick one of the weaker mechs, right? You want a little bit of easier time, you can pick one of the stronger mechs. And there's 5 different difficulty levels that you can choose for the AI, for your opponent. So there's lots of ways of dialing in exactly how much difficulty you want to have. So that's nice. So there you go. That's just some of my initial thoughts on Expeditions. I don't find it boring, but if you watch the playthrough and it looks like it might be a little too streamlined for you, then maybe it's one you might want to pass on. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.